Welcome to the Juicy Truth. Welcome back to part 3 of Wellness Wins versus Wellness Won'ts, aka I'm diving into my hot take on your popular wellness trends, shit you are getting targeted ads for, things you are being influenced on by the internet. And part 1 and 2, I went through things like sauna, red light, castor oil packs, mouth taping, and all sorts of supplements. So go back to part 1 and 2 if you want to get your wellness questions answered. First things first, I do not think a wellness routine should be super stressful. I don't think it should be overwhelming. I don't think it should feel like a full-time job. And if you are not taking care of the foundations of your health, everything that you are eating, how you are sleeping, how you are moving your body, how you're managing your stress and your emotions and trauma, like please don't spend your hard-earned time and money on supplements if you're not at least starting to address some of these foundations as well at the same time, because true change happens when we're working on the foundations. Supplements, biohacking stuff, all these tools can be helpful, but they can't outweigh a lifestyle that is super unhealthy. So if you need to start somewhere, start with those things. I know it's not sexy. I know it's not influenced on you. It's not targeted ads to you know, fucking sleep 8 hours a night. Maybe it is, depending on your ads, but it's so important. So, when in doubt, always go back to the basics. The foundations of your health will never steer you wrong. And then you can use discretion and discernment when it comes to adding in new supplements, new things into your routine, and make sure that it really is supportive for the goals that you have. So, on today's episode, I'm going to be diving into a few more things that you guys had sent me questions about. If there are other things that you haven't heard on the other 2 parts of this, you want me to do another part, let me know. I'm aimed to please, my dear. So if there's other things you are getting influenced on, you have questions on in the world of holistic wellness, let me know. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been working with patients for the last 5 years to help heal their hormones and have a healthy sex life, and also, heal through your trauma using breathwork and things like that. So I have a wide range of experience when it comes to women's health concerns, especially from a holistic perspective. So I'm happy to support you in choosing things and adding things into your life that can help support your goals. So ain't nobody got time to waste their time and money on products that aren't going to do anything. So let's dive in. The first thing I want to talk about on today's episode is something called oil pulling. I know this is maybe not something you're having targeted ads for, because there's not a ton of specific products for it, but it is something that I feel like a lot of wellness influencers talk about, and it's actually something that for the most part I would recommend. So for most people it's going to be a win. So essentially what this means is using an oil. Typically we're going to use coconut oil, or sometimes we can use sesame oil, and pulling it in the mouth between the teeth, essentially swishing the oil, letting it essentially soften into a liquid form, or using one that's already liquid, and pulling it between the teeth, swishing it around the mouth, usually recommended for up to 10 to 15 minutes to get the most effects. The goal of something like this is that these oils are often antimicrobial and can help clean between the teeth and balance the bacteria that are present in the microbiome of the mouth. The oral microbiome is actually really, really powerful and can help us with a wide range of things, whether that's our immune system, our metabolic and cardiovascular health, our brain health. There's actually a building amount of research for how important the health of the oral microbiome is on the rest of our body. So oil pulling is something that's been around for a really long time, and it's one of those things that if you can get into a habit of it, it's pretty cheap. I mean, really all you need is the oil, and you need 10-15 minutes of your time. And you also need to make sure that once you are done oil pulling, you do not swallow the oil. You spit it out into the trash can, not down your sink, because it will clog your sink. I'm not speaking from experience, but I have heard people speaking from experience on this. Oil, especially coconut oil, hardens when it's below a certain temperature. So we don't want to be clogging our sinks with that. So I say oil pulling for most people is going to be a win, because I do think that we all could use a little bit of support with our oral hygiene and our health that way. And that's why I think mouth taping can also be helpful. Tongue scraping also kind of falls into this line. Oil pulling and tongue scraping have been around for a really long time. They're used a lot in Ayurvedic medicine and other traditional medicines. Not so much talked about in Western medicine, because maybe we don't have placebo-controlled double-blind studies on oil pulling and tongue scraping, which is the gold standard, but there's a lot of anecdotal and clinical evidence for these things and being supportive. The only reason why I would hesitate on oil pulling is that we are starting to see how important the oral microbiome is, aka the healthy bacteria that are present there, and if we're oil pulling a lot, in theory, we could potentially remove some of the actual healthy bacteria that are present there. But we can negate the effects of that by doing something like a chewable dental probiotic. So, an oral probiotic that we chew up that's actually targeted to the health of the oral microbiome, or, just use it in moderation. Oil pulling once a week isn't going to destroy your oral microbiome, but something like Listerine will, something like a really astringent or powerful mouthwash will. So the only hesitation that I have is like oil pulling, maybe not something you should do every single day because we do want to keep our oral microbiome robust. But I think the benefits of that outweigh the potential risks, and it's super easy to do. Again, it's cheap. It's like, yeah, you got to take 10 to 15 minutes out of your life to do it, but you have 10 to 15 minutes. And if you want to start with 5 minutes, start there. The traditional mouthwashes that are on the market, like again, Listerine and the like, are fucking terrible for your oral microbiome. So I would recommend doing this over something like that any day of the week. And it can help with making sure your teeth are super clean, getting rid of anything between the teeth, getting rid of bad breath. Like there's all sorts of benefits for oil pulling, and on the same vein, like tongue scraping as well, which again, super easy to incorporate too. So I say both of those are a win. Anything we can do to improve the health of our oral hygiene and all of those things. Again, we're starting to see the benefits of this not only on our cardiac and metabolic health, our cognitive health, and brain function essentially highly depends on the oral microbiome, as well as the health of our gut too. So if you are somebody who deals with a lot of gut issues like bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, anything like that, something like oil pulling, mouth taping, and paying attention to the health of your oral microbiome might be overlooked, but it actually can be a really important piece of the puzzle. So obviously, I always recommend working with a practitioner who can help tailor recommendations to you and your needs and your history, because everybody is so unique. But for the most part, if I'm saying something is a win, like in general, that means it's pretty safe. Of course, there's a few exceptions to everything, but oil pulling is one of those things that, generally speaking, I think is pretty safe and fairly easy to add into your routine. So it's a win for me. The next thing is going to be a Epsom salt or magnesium salt bath. A couple people asked me questions about that, and honestly, I think in general it's a pretty good win. I mean, I'm jealous. I don't have a bathtub currently. I wish I did. I wish I could take Epsom salt baths because they're relaxing AF. I would say for the most part, like magnesium baths, Epsom salt baths, the biggest benefit you're going to get from that is relaxation. We do absorb some magnesium through the skin. So if we're using something like an Epsom salt or a magnesium salt, you are going to be absorbing some of that magnesium transdermally through your skin. So we want to make sure, just like anything, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but if you are putting something on your skin, putting it in your mouth, putting it in your body, make sure that it's good quality. With something like Epsom salts, we need to pay attention to any artificial or quote unquote natural fragrances that are added. If it has a fragrance and it's actually going to be natural, it will say essential oil, or it will say, it'll just say essential oil, like peppermint essential oil, citrus essential oil, orange essential oil. It won't say natural fragrance. So something to be on the lookout for. If you are going to be soaking in anything, know that we absorb a lot through our skin. So be really careful of the quality of any Epsom salts, magnesium salts, or anything that you are using. I know a lot of people are, recommending these for more detox purposes, so more like a detox bath. For me personally, I've seen most of the benefits, not just me personally, but in practice, I've seen most of the benefits from Epsom salt or magnesium baths for muscle relaxation, for overall nervous system relaxation, for just, a good self-care practice. If we are looking for more of a detox related bath, we may want to introduce something like a baking soda bath. Epsom salts could maybe be supportive for detox, but it's not going to be at the top of my list for supporting detox pathways. Something like a baking soda bath or any of the things that we talked about in the first part of this, I would say are going to be more supportive. But again, everybody's so unique. You do you. If you love soaking in a bath, you think it's helpful for you, like fucking go for it. again, very little risk when it comes to an Epsom salt or magnesium bath. As long as you're getting a good quality product, then I'd say it's a pretty safe thing to introduce into your routine. If you're going to be using any sort of essential oils in your bath, I would just be careful that we're using ones that are skin safe. Like, you don't want to use like a cinnamon essential oil because that's not going to feel good, especially if you put your sensitive lady parts into a bathtub. Like, just, again, not speaking from experience, but just knowing about these essential oils, we do need to be careful. So something like lavender essential oil is going to be fairly well tolerated, really easy to incorporate. You can throw it into a bath with the magnesium and the Epsom salts rather than getting an artificially scented one. Like, go with a essential oil that you can control the amount of scent in there and you actually know what's going in there. So, sidebar, oil pulling, tongue scraping, and Epsom salt baths are wins for me. Again, easy to incorporate into your routine, fairly cheap, effective, and very low risk. That's kind of good qualifications from my perspective. The next thing is a little bit of a bigger topic. And I know I said in part one that detox is something that has been harped on by a lot of like wellness influencers. We want to support detox. We want to detox, all this stuff. Like, and I say that halfway joking because our bodies are very good at detoxifying. There's literally so many systems in the body that are set up to help us detoxify. But again, like I said in part one, we live in a pretty toxic world. Like, yes, we are exposed to a lot more toxins than we maybe used to be. We are burdening our detox pathways with everything that we're consuming through our food, consuming through alcohol and substances and environmental exposures and prescription medications and blah, 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 blah. So there is a lot burdening our detox pathways. However, if you are hydrating, and especially if you're adding something like a high quality electrolyte, if you are replacing with nutrient dense foods in your diet, if you are eliminating through your bowels, preferably pooping multiple times per day, if you are sweating regularly, you are supporting pathways of detox already. We don't need to do a ton of extra stuff. But again, I say that with a grain of salt because there are things that we can do to support detox pathways, like the baths that I just talked about. Lemon water was something that a lot of people asked about. And personally, I don't recommend drinking lemon water regularly because of the impact that amount of acid can have on the enamel of your teeth. Like, I'm not a dentist, but if you're drinking, the equivalent of half a lemon to a whole lemon per day, which some people will do when they're doing, warm lemon water in the morning to start the digestion process and support detox. Like, in theory, sure, that's great, but we're not really supposed to be drinking like half of a lemon worth of lemon juice every day. That's pretty harsh, not only on the teeth, but on the stomach. And if you feel like you tolerate it, great, go ahead. But it's not going to be something that I typically recommend doing every single day. If you want to do it occasionally, great. But again, not something that I recommend as a daily practice, just because it is very acidic, very strong, and could potentially have some negative effects on the digestive tract and your teeth just in general. So if you're going to do something like a lemon water, make sure it's very, very diluted, but you can also do it like every other day or a couple times a week to get some of the benefits without, potentially running into any of those side effects. On the same vein of detox, many, many, many people ask me questions about parasite cleanses, parasite detoxes, and heavy metal detoxes. So this is a juicy one. There's a lot locked up in those two topics, and I'm going to try to do them justice as much as I can. Being a naturopathic doctor, we talk a lot about things like parasites and heavy metals and gut infections and all of those things that you're typically not going to be talking about with your conventional provider, but that play a huge role in chronic disease progression. If our body is burdened with a heavy toxin load, heavy metals, we're dealing with any sort of imbalance in the microbiome or any sort of parasite infection, we're not going to feel very well. So I work mostly with women's hormonal concerns, painful periods, fibroids, endometriosis, fertility support, perimenopause. So we might not immediately think about things like heavy metals, parasites, and the health of the gut when we think about hormone health, but it's absolutely a really important piece of the puzzle. If our gut health is not up to par. If we're dealing with any sort of fungal overgrowth, parasite infection, or heavy metal overwhelm, our hormones are just the messenger, and the only way that they speak to us is through uncomfortable symptoms. So sometimes if we're experiencing a lot of the discomfort with our menstrual cycles, or we're getting a lot of gut symptoms like bloating, gas, constipation, fullness after meals, like sometimes we need to start investigating these deeper causes, or these deeper issues like a parasite, microbiome imbalance, or a heavy metal. I absolutely, absolutely, absolutely do not recommend, please hear me on this, I do not recommend doing a parasite cleanse, a heavy metal detox, a really any type of intense detox without the oversight of a practitioner. I know that that is not feasible for every single person to be able to work with a practitioner hand in hand, but the risks of doing a full-blown detox protocol on your own, they're there. This is not a easy process for the body. If we're trying to get rid of something like a parasite or an overload of heavy metals, we have to do very specific things to support the body through that process. And we need to basically adjust based on how your body responds. So something like a heavy metal detox or a parasite detox, if we're doing it on our own, we're just doing it whatever, some influencer tells us to do, we could feel a lot worse and actually put ourselves at risk for creating long-term problems if we're not doing a detox like this safely. So somebody that I really, really respect, and I know that she does cleanse protocols and things like that, is Dr. Jess. I think her name is literally Dr. Jess MD. So she has a whole community. She has a whole library of resources. She would be a great resource that even if you can't work with a practitioner one-on-one, you can at least get some support on how to know, what symptoms to look out for if you are trying to do a parasite protocol or a heavy metal detox on your own. Wow, that word is hard to say. Dr. Jess is a wealth of knowledge. She has a ton of free and paid resources, but her whole thing is how you can approach the detox process. Yes, using things like supplements and detox protocols, but also how you can support your body through the detox process so that you don't essentially feel worse before you feel better. Because that is the risk of any time we're trying to essentially get rid of something in the body, whether it's a parasite or metals or yeast or whatever it might be. Whenever we're trying to get the body to let go of something that it's been holding on to, this also applies to emotions as well, we can have the potential to feel a hell of a lot worse if we're not carefully listening to the symptoms that our body gives us through this process, and we are not altering essentially our treatment protocol based on how your body responds. So this is why I usually don't recommend doing something like a parasite protocol or a heavy metal detox or anything just because somebody on the internet says it, just because Susie on TikTok said that it worked for her and she got rid of all these parasites and it was great. Like, you don't know her health history. You don't know what kind of training she has. You don't know if the products that she's using are actually really good quality or not. Like, I would say if you are going to try to do a protocol like this, just make damn sure that you are vetting any of the products that you're using and the people that you're listening to actually know what they're talking about and have legitimate training. They don't have to be doctors. There's a lot of really well-educated other practitioners out there, but it needs to be somebody who's very comfortable with working with these kinds of cleanse protocols. Because sure, you might be able to get away with doing something like a parasite cleanse on your own, but the potential risk of you feeling a lot worse and potentially having some really uncomfortable and or dangerous side effects is definitely there. I do think that for the majority of us, a parasite protocol, parasite cleanse, or a heavy metal detox, or both, could be helpful. We live in an environment where we get a lot of exposure to things like heavy metals. We have the potential for parasites living in the microbiome because they're just really fucking good at existing. And they've been around for so long, and they are something that's pretty pervasive in our environment. Even if we're not actively doing things to, where we could pick up parasites, like traveling or drinking water supplies that aren't clean or anything, like parasites can happen just from, coming in through our environment, through our food supply, from our pets. If you are somebody that has a cat or a dog in your home, and especially if you let that cat or dog lick your face, you probably have a parasite. Hate to tell you. Most of the time, or I won't say most of the time, a lot of the times we can live with them without a lot of uncomfortable symptoms, but generally speaking, it's a good idea to get rid of them if we can. However, we need to be really, really careful in how we do this. And again, I know I'm a broken record here, but I just don't want you walking away from this podcast and like going and doing a parasite cleanse because whoever on TikTok said to do it, and then you feel like absolute trash. I want you, if you are going to do something like a parasite cleanse, any sort of detox protocol, that you are really well supported throughout the process and that you have somebody who can help guide you through it. This is something that I do with my patients, but like I said, Dr. Jess is a great resource. There's also a practitioner. Her name is Rain Holton, I believe is her last name. Her Instagram account is Balancing Flamingo. I know it's a little crazy, but she's a really good wealth of knowledge as well. And I know that I have a lot of knowledge in terms of gut health and parasites and cleansing and detox, but her and Dr. Jess are like fucking experts on it, and they would be great resources for you if you really want to dive into a cleanse protocol like that. They both have products that they recommend that are vetted and good quality. They both have resources available. So I would recommend checking out them if you are feeling like you want to do some sort of cleanse protocol. It's not a total won't for me. It is a win if you do a cleanse protocol like that appropriately and with the right guidance. You can feel a hell of a lot better, especially with something like parasites or heavy metals. Like some of the things that can clear up with things like that is any sort of skin concern. Like if you deal with a lot of eczema, rashes, acne, we can experience improvements in our mood and our energy and our level of irritability. Like both of those things can improve when we're detoxing and getting rid of things appropriately. Our hormone health can improve. Our gut health, of course, can improve. So if you deal with a lot of bloating, discomfort, and things in the gut, like it might be time to look into a cleanse. Of course, know that everybody's so unique and individual that it might not be the right fit for you. But I would highly suggest, again, working with somebody who can help guide you through that process, who can recommend specific products, because not all people respond to the same thing. Not all products work for the same thing. Like, again, it's a really complex issue, and it's not something that I would recommend just like blindly following somebody on the internet. It's something that we need to be really, really intentional about. And there's a lot of things that you need to do during any detox protocol to really support your body in that process. So I hope I harped on that enough for you to know that, like, please don't pick up something just because somebody on the internet said it was a parasite cleanse. Make sure you're doing your research, your due diligence, you're following practitioners that you trust who have legitimate training, who guide people through these kinds of cleanses regularly, and who can provide support and resources if you need that. So Dr. Jess and Rain, I would say, are both great people to pay attention to. There's obviously so many more people out there on the internet, but those are the two that come to mind for me. And I know that the products that they use are good quality as well. Dr. Noah as well, I think that's his handle, is just Dr. Noah. He's a great resource too. So yes, this is something that I do in my practice with people. It's not something that I recommend on the internet. So I would suggest going to any of those practitioners, and they would be able to give you some more resources or specific products to utilize. So long story short, parasite protocols, cleanses, heavy metal detoxes, yes, they can be super helpful. They can make a fucking world of difference in the way that you feel, but they absolutely need to be something that you do very carefully, that you support your body through, and that you choose products very wisely. So I don't recommend doing that on your own. Okay, got it? Got it. Great. Moving on. The next thing that a lot of people have asked me about is something called rebounding, and specifically lymphatic drainage techniques. And I believe I talked about in part 2 how important our lymphatic system is for essentially getting rid of our cells' waste products. So our lymphatic system runs throughout the whole body, basically alongside our arteries and nerves, arteries, veins, and nerves, and our lymph system carries away cellular waste and debris from our organs. And basically we have little lymph nodes, which you may be familiar with, that are certain like collections of little, basically like pockets of lymphatic drainage. So we have them in the groin area, we have them in the armpits, we have them in the head and neck. They're all over the body. But our lymphatic system is one system in the body that doesn't have any pumps. So it doesn't have anything that actually physically drains it, but we can do things to support that drainage process. Just by you like being up and moving around, hydrating appropriately, any sort of exercise, all of that is going to be supportive for lymphatic drainage because we just literally need to physically move. That's why if you're somebody who's like on bed rest, like you're stuck not moving for a long time, people have to physically move you every once in a while so that you don't get swelling, you don't get discomfort in especially your extremities, so like hands, feet, and stuff, because you're not able to drain. So, simply by hydrating appropriately, by being up and moving around regularly, by doing a lot of the foundational stuff for your health, you are supporting lymphatic drainage. But we can do other things that are supportive for lymphatic health, specifically like gua sha, facial rolling, and face tape, like I talked about for more of the drainage of the head and the neck. Those can be supportive, especially for any puffiness or things that we have in the face, the head, and the neck, can support healthy skin, cell turnover, all of those things. But if we want to think about lymphatic drainage for the rest of the body, things like dry brushing and rebounding are both really popular. So, rebounding is essentially like or vibrational plate. Again, I'm kind of lumping all of these in together, but that essentially gives like some manual stimulus to the lymphatic system by either jumping up and down or by vibrating the surface underneath you to, in theory, move that lymphatic fluid within the body. Dry brushing means that we're taking a dry brush, and actually stimulating the skin on the outside of the body to theoretically move lymph. I believe, don't quote me if I'm incorrect on this, but I believe acupuncture as well works kind of indirectly on lymphatic fluid because it's helping to move energy and chi. Certain types of energy medicine as well, like Reiki, craniosacral, can have an impact on the lymphatic system too, but they're not going to be like directly stimulating it, to my knowledge. Again, I'm not an expert on all things, so if you are a practitioner in these areas and you have a different take, please let me know. I'm always happy to learn. But from what I have gathered over the years, it is really supportive in any way that we can stimulate our lymphatic flow, and doing things like rebounding, dry brushing, vibration plate, or even lymphatic massage, where a practitioner is coming in, or you can do it yourself, coming in and stimulating the skin, and specific techniques to help with lymphatic drainage. I personally think that most types of lymphatic drainage support are a win. They come in varying degrees of, stuff that you can do at home versus stuff that you need expensive equipment for versus stuff that you need a practitioner for. But me personally, I think anything that we can do to support the lymphatic system and supporting lymphatic drainage is generally a win. Because it's such an important part of the detox pathway, it's such an important part of our body basically feeling as good as possible. Yes, we can have very superficial effects of lymphatic drainage, like on our skin health as well. But for deeper wellness, more of a holistic approach to wellness, lymphatic fluid and drainage absolutely needs to be considered as part of the puzzle. So you can do something that's guided by a practitioner, like a lymphatic massage. There's massage therapists who specialize in lymphatic drainage techniques. You can do something like a vibrational plate or rebounding that requires like some equipment to help you with moving lymph. You can do stuff on your own, like dry brushing, like gua sha, like face tape, like facial rolling, like your own lymphatic massage techniques. There's lots of different options to choose from. But I say, generally speaking, anything within reason, anything that helps support lymphatic drainage is most of the time going to be a win for me, as long as it's not like crazy expensive or seems suspect. Like there's new stuff coming out all of the time, of course, but these are the ones that I think are the most popular, at least from what I've seen and heard. And for the most part, the majority of them, to my knowledge, are safe, effective, and varying degrees of difficulty and investment. So you could always start with something small like dry brushing at home, or lymphatic massage techniques at home, any of the facial rolling, gua sha, things like that. Again, pretty easy to incorporate into your routine and can have a pretty substantial effect. Especially if you are trying to do any sort of detox protocol, like we just talked about, your lymphatic system absolutely needs to be included. But I would say if you're anybody who's on any sort of weight loss journey, if you're wanting to improve your hormone health, if you're wanting to keep your skin as healthy as possible, wanting to support gut health, and just wanting to age gracefully and live as long as you possibly can, like pay attention to your lymphatic system. Remember that being up and moving, hydrating appropriately, eating nourishing foods most of the time, like that is kind of indirectly supporting your lymphatic system. But doing other things to help directly support it can be a good part of any wellness routine, in my opinion. So, oil pulling, tongue scraping, both wins for me. Magnesium baths, salt baths, like mostly a win, maybe not for the purposes that people are talking about on the internet, but for relaxation, for muscle tension, for just overall feeling good, I think they're a win. Lemon water, I would say, is a won't question mark for most people, but if you are going to incorporate it, I wouldn't recommend doing daily. You do you, but that's what I would recommend. Parasite and heavy metal detoxes and cleanse protocols, they're a win if you're working with a practitioner that you trust and have really good information. A won't if you're trying to do it on your own. You don't have resources. Like, please don't do that. Please, please, please. The lymphatic drainage techniques, rebounding, all those things, I would say for the most part as a win. You can start small, like dry brushing is super easy to incorporate. You can start with the stuff to the face, the head, and the neck. Those are going to get you a decent amount of benefit for a very minimal investment in your time and money. And then you can always upgrade to things like rebounding, vibrational plates, massages, things like that. But I say those are a win as well. So that is my wrap on part 3. And if there is anything of these 3 parts that you have specific questions about, there's other things that you want me to dive into and cover, please always feel free to send me suggestions on Instagram at docjenb_nd. Maybe I'll do a part 4 if there's enough questions about things, but I want to know what you want to know. So if there's specific topics that you want to hear about on the podcast, anything in the world of women's health, wellness, empowerment, sexual health, breath work, those are all my jam. So if there is something specific you want to hear, I want to hear from you. Make sure to check out the resources and things in the show notes. And as always, I will see you on the next ep. I love you.